Legislature in Guam is called to order. Senator Respisho, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and good evening to you and good evening to everyone. I move that we adopt this session agenda dated October 1st, 2012.
On motion without any objections, so ordered. Can I ask Speaker Pangilinan if you can lead us in prayer?
Thank you. Everyone, please rise. Please bow your heads. Ginanitatay lahinya ng Espiritu Santo. Amen. Diyos saina, mangagyam talugoy ni na parabin ispia empenyo ni parabin kubri todo ini necesidad itaw-taw mo gwinigi islangwahan. Manmanoyam pudet gini taw-taw para insegwi sa sumami ni taymano ni nasinyan mami para iminaulik para todos. Taza gitano tilalatsi, edyo na hagwa unwa na Diyos, unwa imfiat tilalatsi. Lo todo'y pumalo, sinya manadinansi, como inekunguko, da inspia, da siguro, na intatiji espiritu mo, da ni pinanagwe ni Laimu as Jesus, ani stabagwe ni Gitano. Ingagagaw na continue in bendisiham, dan todo itaw to Guam, dan todo i man mafatuwi ni na isla. Na siguro na ite at umami, tiyo na faniridaw, da ite at umami, ufan tinektuk, ni Gwinaida, dan inafamulig. And no, ingagagaw, gininilay mo, dan sinananya as Maria. Ginanitatay, lahinya, dan Espiritu Santo. Amen.
Thank you very much. Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes, can you lead us in the recitation of the Inipresi? Imastaklu ihenesoko, imastaklum di corazonho, zanimastigo nanisinyaho, urfesen maisejo, para bajo protegi, zahu defendi, ihenengi, ikultura, lenguaje, aire, hanum, danitano tamor. Nieren shako derecho, inyasu estapa. Esti wapitna ihilo Biblia, dani banderahu, ibanderan wahan. I'd like to ask Senator Mana Silva Tyron if he can lead us in Finogi Chamorro and Senator Samadini in the national anthem. Clerk, please take roll call.
Senator Tom Adda. Senator Tony Adda. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Guthertz. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Wampet.
Gaga.
Senator Yamashita. Senator Guthertz.
Can you excuse her? She's in the break.
Senator Guthertz.
Can you go ahead, Senator, and excuse her? Then I know she's current. Call her name. No, just call her name.
Senator Guthertz. Madam Speaker, I wish to report there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that we approve the legislative journal from the session that we had earlier, subject to corrections.
No objections ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objections ordered.
Madam Speaker, as of session this morning, we are in receipt of a message from Imegalahan Guahan, dated today, October 1st, 2012. And in this message, he writes to you, citing that he vetoed Bill number 516, an act to amend Section 3 of Public Law 31-40 to extend the obligation deadline of the ARA Trust Fund, to amend Section 2I of Chapter I, to amend Section 2.4 of Chapter I, to add a new Section 14 to Chapter 6, Chapter 11 rather, to amend Section 13 of Chapter 12, and to amend Section 6 of Part 3, Chapter 3, all of Public Law 31-233. And then he also, in this letter, calls us into a special session for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Copies of this message has been made available to all members. And I move that this be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion without any objections ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
No objections ordered.
And there are no reports of select committees, and there are no introduction and first reading of bills and resolutions that require such first readings. And so on item 13, Madam Speaker, I defer to the sponsor of Bill 516-31 for a motion.
Speaker Pangilinan, you recognize.
Thank you, and Sijasmasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd move that notwithstanding the objections of the governor, vetoed bill number 516 be placed in the voting file for the purpose of an override, and I'd like to just briefly discuss the bill,
You may
or
proceed.
the veto. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as earlier stated, the governor had vetoed Bill 516 and sent a message of his objections to the bill. And so there's really no need to go into any other provision except the provision that the governor objected to. The governor referenced the extension and the restoration of the language with regards to, excuse me, Madam Speaker, with regards to the oversight that was committed by myself and the committee in making a technical amendments to the bill on the deletion of the word executive in the title of part of Public Law 233, the budget bill. And the ending result, as pointed out to us by the judiciary, was that it, by removing the word executive, it meant that unclassified employees are prohibited in the government of Guam except for the list that was in the bill. And that list, of course, was what had been boilerplate language in the past. And so when we removed executive, it meant that the prohibition and extended to the judiciary and the legislative, because there are no exceptions for the judiciary and the legislative under the boilerplate language. So the language was to restore that, and I think the governor realizes what happened there, references it, and so I admit to that mistake, Madam Speaker. I think the judiciary is very comfortable that it was an unintended mistake, and it was not intended to change the structure of how they operate and their ability to hire unclassified positions within the judiciary. And we certainly agree and affirm that that is definitely not the intention. So the language would restore that, and the governor recognizes that. But of course, this main objection and the reason for the veto is Section 6 of the bill, which would have which redirected an appropriation that would have expired today, as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker. It would have expired for fiscal year 2012. That was a set-aside appropriation to fund mental health if the court orders deposits to be reinstated. Now, as the governor rightly points out, there were orders under the amended permanent injunction of $15 million to deposit into the trust fund at the courts, with the courts. And under the former administration, before Governor Cowell came in, deposits were begun to be made pursuant to court order that was a scheduled payment. And what happened was, of course, that greatly impacted the cash flow of this government. When Governor Cowell came in, and we even pushed Governor Cowell as well as Governor Camacho, that we needed to amend that because of its impact on the financial operations of the government. The times were tight, money was hard to come by, and this cash that was already budgeted would have hampered operations because it was budgeted for operations, being used for operations, and we had to cut that appropriation by the amount of the court-ordered deposits. Well, Governor Cabo did finally heed our request, and based upon the advice of his financial team as well, he went into the courts and requested that there be a stay on the deposits and the order for the deposits because there was already almost $10 million in the bank and the money wasn't being spent. And if you took a look at the plan of action by the federal management team, they wouldn't have been able to spend that money in that fiscal year, FY 2012, if all the deposits were made. That you couldn't hire $18 million worth of new personnel in 6 months. And so the court said, we're going to proceed with the plan of action, and we have enough money in the bank, and Governor Calvo, we agree with you. We will suspend and put a stay on making cash deposits based upon the court order that had been issued. So no more cash deposits for the rest of 2000 for now until we continue to move forward. When we need more money, we have the option of doing that. And so the $3 million appropriation was made available for fiscal year 2012 if the court had made the order. The court never has made an order, so the money really lapsed, Madam Speaker, the appropriation, the authorization to spend that money. Remember, they never had that money, so it didn't impact their operation at all. Redirecting the appropriation does not impact the operation because they don't have that. They're not using that money. That's money just in case the court ordered a deposit. It has not. In the meantime, Madam Speaker, while we're moving forward, you know, the University of Guam, because of the challenges here that we find ourselves with, is moving forward on a tuition hike that they want to impose upon the students, and the students have come to us and saying, you know, we really can't afford this. Times are tough. And so how can you help the University of Guam alleviate the need to get additional revenue for, for their operations in lieu of a tuition hike? And so knowing that, number one, the court would not be ordering any money to be deposited of that 3 million because it's lapsed already. It'll have to order some from some other source, but it lapsed. So the appropriation authorization is no longer available even for mental health as of today, even without this veto, because that appropriation has lapsed. So before the end of the fiscal year, we said we're going to take that, redirect it to the two entities, Madam Speaker, plus about $60,000 of the remaining amount to Medicare reimbursements for our retirees. And so the governor's saying that that money impacts mental health. Well, we disagree. I disagree. I've explained why I think that it does not impact that. There's an additional $4.8 million in cash that continues to remain in the bank that hasn't been spent, hasn't been earmarked by the federal management, available to the federal management team and mental health to move forward with continuing the implementation of the plan of action. You know, Madam Speaker. And so in addition to that, Madam Speaker, we said, so we're covering the operations because mental health's budget was fully funded. We didn't cut it. When we said we're going to cut 14% from the budget, we sheltered off mental health. So their budget remains intact. The people that used to be paid under the federal management team are being transitioned to the regular budget of mental health. In addition, so we're covering those operational requirements of mental health that have been implemented for and through the federal management team in conformance with and compliance with the amended permanent injunction plan of action. And so we have $4.8 million available in the bank to be able to meet additional requirements over what's budgeted now of any implementation. In addition, Madam Speaker, as I pointed out, we had a public hearing on the mental health fees. And so the money to be generated from the mental health fees have not been earmarked at all. We have not appropriated that money. We have not earmarked that money. What it will do is go into an account, and the money will stay there until appropriated by the legislature. And so we felt that we are very confident, I am, that this body will pass the mental health because everybody supported it, will pass and move forward on the mental health fees. We're going to be billing health insurance, by the way, Madam Speaker, health insurance and other insurance companies. That's who's going to be paying this mental health fees because mental health is on parity now with regards to the provision of care with medical health. So if you are selling a health insurance policy, you have to provide mental health coverage under the Mental Health Parity Act. So we're not going to be adding an additional burden to the consumer to pay for mental health services at mental health because his insurance has to cover it. Now, it may impact the profits of the insurance company, you know, but they've been charging us for that thing because it's been on parity for years without having to pay for any of the services. You know, they're the ones that have been planning and saying, just in case you guys put in a fee, we're going to charge you as part of your medical insurance premium, mental health services. But nobody over the last 10 years have paid a dime. No health insurance company has paid a dime to mental health for the provision of mental health coverage under our GovGuam Health program because we couldn't bill them. There was no fee schedule. So they've been racking in the money. Now that it's on parity, now that we have a fee, they're going to have to make some payments. And that's just the way everybody understands it to be, Madam Speaker. So when we implement and pass the mental health fees, the estimate on that could be anywhere between a low of 7 to a high of 12. That's the economic impact analysis. Could swing either way. It may be as low as 4, but if it's as low as 4, then the money that we've been, their authorization of appropriation that we've redirected now to GCC and the University of Guam to assist the students there and those institutions deal with the coping increase in their costs and to ensure that we support the students in their desire to get educated and keep education affordable and redirect that amount is something that I think can be supported. The governor's saying it's an empty promise. Why is it an empty promise to redirect that to UOG, but it's not an empty promise to leave it in here for mental health? Why? Why is the governor saying that, oh my God, if you redirect this to UOG, it's an empty promise. But if you leave it here and leave it for mental health, it's not an empty promise? I don't understand that. Either it's it's a viable appropriation authority or it's not a viable appropriation authority. Is it viable for mental health? Well, if it's viable for mental health and they don't need it because the court is not ordered any deposit at all to be required under the court order and the appended permanent injunction, that then if you take that and redirect it to UOG, it shouldn't be an empty promise, because if the court had ordered it, the governor were going to fund it. That's what I'm saying, Madam Speaker. And now he's saying, oh, it's going to be an empty promise. The only empty promise that's going to occur is if the governor doesn't follow the law. Because if he's saying, leave it in as an appropriation for mental health and I'll fund it, well, if they don't need it and we redirect it, then it should be funded as well when we redirect it to UOG. No answer for buts, unless the governor just doesn't want to do it. And Madam Speaker, that really, so none of the facts, none of the issues have changed, I think, in my opinion, in terms of how I had presented the bill in the past when this body supported it, and we supported it unanimously. Nothing has changed except the governor has raised the red herring issue and said, you know, I can't do it because it violates that. It does not. It does not violate it because there is no court order to say deposit the money. It does not violate it because the appropriation only existed for FY 2012, which is already lapsed, and the bill that we passed then redirected that appropriation to GCC and UOG at the plea and the plight of the students to help to have us support them in their efforts to ensure that they can continue to get their education by keeping tuition affordable and therefore higher education accessible to them. So, Madam Speaker, once again, I understand that the governor has thrown out some issues there, but I don't think it has changed what was being considered by this body. The facts don't change. There is no court order. The governor's saying there is no court order. The court hasn't ordered it. The money still remains available. There's still $4.8 million in the bank, same facts, and the mental health fee schedule can be implemented, and we can generate, you know, anywhere from my estimate of a low of $4 million to as high as $12 million if their economic impact statement that was submitted along with the mental health fee is correct. So we have a huge swing in here, Madam Speaker. And so all of these things coming together, Madam Speaker, I believe still says that this bill continues to be viable, that the objections of the governor, I believe, are addressed by these other issues which he doesn't point out. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I think that, and I ask for the continued support that was given when this bill was passed, and ask for everyone else's vote as we move on this override, Madam Speaker, to implement this bill. Thank you, and Sidusmasi, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, notwithstanding the governor's objections, is there anyone who would like to speak on the motion? There being none, so therefore we are down at the voting file. Can I ask the clerks? Yeah, we're in the voting file now for vetoed bill 516.
Vetoed Bill number 516-31 COR as introduced by D.C. Pangilinan, J.T. Wampat, E.D.D., R.J. Vespasian, and others. An act to amend Section 3 of Public Law 31-40 relative to extending the obligation deadline of the ARAF trust funds, and to amend Section 2I and Section 2(4) of Chapter 1 to add a new Section 14 to Chapter 11, to amend Section 13 of Chapter 12, and to amend Section 6 of Part 3 of Chapter 3, all of Public Law 31-233.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Atta. Senator Tony Atta. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Dueñas. Senator Gutherts. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Wampat.
I'm good.
Senator Yamashita.
Notwithstanding the governor's veto, Bill 516-31 received 9 yeas, 6 nays. The override fails. Madam Speaker, do you have a motion? Oh. Majority Leader, you have a motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, and given the disposition of the body in its most recent action, I move that we revert back to motions.
Any objection?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they're passing out Bill number 496-31, and we have a request from the author of this bill, Speaker Wampat, asking that a public hearing be waived and to place this legislation on the session agenda. And she writes, as you are aware, U.S. DOE and the Government of Guam has agreed to extend the deadline to obligate ARA funds from September 30th, 2012 to September 30th, 2013. And this bill provides for that extension and avoids the possibility of DOE losing these much-needed ARA funds for our schools. And at this time, I request for your disposition on this request.
After carefully evaluating the request to waive the requirement of a public hearing on Bill 496-31 COR as amended, Section 3B of Public Law 3140 relative to extending the deadline to obligate or expend American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, I certify the Bill 496-31 COR meets one of the requirements set forth in Section 2103A of Title II Guam Code Annotated, and the requirement for public hearing is hereby waived.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Having received your disposition on Bill 496-31, I move that this bill, as substituted by the author on the floor, be placed in the top of the second reading file.
Any objection? Hearing none.
And that we proceed to the second reading file.
Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion then to place Bill 496-31 COR in third reading file, and if I can just briefly, as substituted by the author on the floor.
Any objections? Hearing none.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the bill, of course, there are 3 sections. The first section actually is the provision that we had originally in 516, which, of course, appropriates a certain amount of money. If you look at Section A, B, the appropriation of $60 million there, which will be used, of course, for the ARA monies, which will be used for the Department of Education. And B actually would allow for the object class also to use them as continual appropriations for the department that's been earmarked for capital improvement projects for renovation, rehabilitation, and repair of Unplugged Middle School, for the STEM program. C would be for the implementation of the financial management information system. There's a need, of course, for the monies to be able to pay for personnel overtime. And then D is that DOE shall report to the governor and the legislature on a monthly basis as to the obligation and expenditure of the funds. As you know, today is the deadline in which then the change of the time frame from September 30, 2012, now we are requesting for that extension for 2013, since we've heard that US DOE has granted the extension as the governor had requested. Section 2 is an oversight, and what this does actually is just to put in the restrictions on line 15, which is the word restrictions on executive branch hiring. Otherwise, you know what the language was, which would have prohibited the courts and the legislature in paying its employees. And last but not least, maybe 13. The last is, and I would just like to, in section 3, if you recall the discussion that we had, and this was verified by the chair of tourism and also by Senator Respicio, who actually made the motion at the time, but inadvertently, apparently the language there was not reflected in the final bill. And for those of you who don't know, that this Friday, or this weekend actually, is the Micronesian Fair, and already they have started to realize a snag in what had happened or what did not happen, and what this would do is actually clarify the language so that then those different groups who are receiving rather TAF monies and are now giving back in terms of services, that it would be smoother. So those are the 3 specific sections that are all time certain. The ARA, of course, and the legislative and judicial branches would be able to continue to pay its employees, and then the last for the language that has gone into effect actually, but the groups will be affected, the cultural groups will be affected this weekend. And so with that, of course, the last thing that I would like to ask in a motion is that to place Senator Pangilinan as the 3rd co-sponsor. So my motion then is to place Bill 496 to the 3rd reading file, if there aren't any objections.
On the motion for Senator Pangilinan to be the 3rd co-sponsor, any objection? On the main motion, anybody wish to be heard? Seeing none, Madam Speaker, do you wish to close? There being nothing, the bill then is placed in the voting file. Mr. Majority Leader, do you have a...
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that we vote on Bill 496-31 as substituted by the author on the floor without engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Bill number 496-31 COR, as substituted by the author on the floor, introduced by J.T. Wampat, EDD, Tina Munia Barnes, V.C. Pangilinan. An act to amend Section 3B of Public Law 31-40 relative to extending the deadline to obligate or expand American Recovery and Reinvestment Funds, to amend Section 13 of Chapter 12 of Public Law 31-233 relative to restrictions on hiring of unclassified employees, and to amend Section 14A of Chapter 10 of Public Law 31-233 relative to service and report requirements of the Tourist Attraction Fund, TAF.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Ada. Senator Tony Ada. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Dueñas. Senator Gutherts. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyrone. Speaker Wampat. Senator Yamashita.
Bill 496-31 received 15 ayes. Bill 496-31 COR has been duly passed by the 31st Guam Legislature. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adjourn subject to the call of the Speaker.
Any objection? So ordered. We stand adjourned, subject to call of Speaker.